Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here again, and thank you very, very much for taking the time to join me today. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Alexandra Dotcheva, who is a former symphony orchestra violinist turned nurse and real estate investor. Quite the mix there. Alexandra moved from Bulgaria to the United States in 2000 and received her doctorate in violin from Louisiana State University in 2007. She joined the Syracuse Symphony Orchestra in 2006, and in 2008, prompted by the economic crisis, she decided to pursue a career in nursing, and we'll get to that a wee bit here in a while. And Alexandra has been practicing as a registered nurse since 2011 and is currently a full-time home care nurse and owner of 3 real estate businesses. Alexandra's passion for health, martial arts, fitness and financial independence, as well as her experience with the challenges of cultural integration, inspired her to write a book. It really is simple, a holistic approach to self-confidence, a practical guide in which she shares her journey to success with the intention to inspire many others to embrace change and pursue their dreams in spite of any fear or insecurity that may exist. The book is based entirely on Alexandra's experience with overcoming a 20 plus year-long history of low self-esteem and poor self-confidence. Alexandra, thank you very, very much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Gary. It's such a pleasure.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. So you've had a very fascinating career journey. And when we were chatting prior to recording, we were talking about your musical career. Obviously, that was one of the things that had taken you over to the United States in the first place, and then subsequently nursing, and then subsequently your other business interests. Can you share some pivotal moments that influenced your path and how you navigated such diverse career changes, please?
Well, it wasn't by choice exactly, Gary. It was just because the economic situation and the fact that, in spite that I had been a musician for 26 years when the economic crisis, the financial crisis hit in 2008 in the States.
Yeah.
I knew very well I was not competitive enough to continue successfully to progress as a musician. And I had to face this fact. It was very hard. It was my early midlife crisis. I was 32 years old.
Yeah.
And orchestras were bankrupting. I mean, my musician career was because, well, of course, influenced by my parents who were musicians.
Right.
And when you're in Eastern Europe and your parents are musicians, you become a musician. There isn't much room for negotiation. And plus, it was communism, socialism in the 80s when I started violin at age 6, and it was considered a very prestigious profession. Although my parents always programmed me mentally that I would immigrate from Bulgaria because of the situation there. But even in Europe, where orchestras are sponsored by governments, the culture is very highly regarded in many Western European countries. So my parents said, okay, you become a decent violinist, a good violinist, you will always have a job. Well, I came to America because it so happened that I couldn't make it in Europe. So I came to America, and very different situation. The governments don't sponsor arts and culture so much. And we relied on rich people, private sponsors.
Yeah.
And the problem, particularly with the Syracuse Symphony at the time, was that because of the high taxation and high corruption of the New York state government, many of the major businesses had been kicked out of New York because they couldn't prosper there. So eventually, as the financial crisis kicked, nobody wanted to support our orchestra, and we did become bankrupt in 2011. But at that time, I was about to graduate from nursing school because I saw the writing on the wall 3 years earlier, right?
Yeah.
And I had a job waiting for me, but there were orchestra members, 2 members, family members that lost both incomes in some cases. And it was very hard to see, but you have to roll with the market sometimes. And I absolutely detested this whole idea that I have to conform to the market conditions to be successful and to have peace of mind financially. And also but the other thing is, I mean, the market is not as evil as many people perceive it, especially the arts people who think, well, everybody has to support our art. Well, not necessarily, because people have other dire needs. And at some point, you have to ask yourself the question, at least I think so, how can I mostly be useful to society in doing something that I really would like to do and feel like I contribute to people's well-being. So nursing was an option because I had spent 12 years in specialized music school and then 11 more years in college as a
Yeah.
violinist. And I said, what can I do to not be in college for so long? So nursing was an excellent option because it was in demand. You can find the work everywhere in the world. And that's when I switched from arts to science. That was the major switch. And then the real estate came later.
Mhm. That's an incredible journey, and I was just writing a note there in terms of, whenever I'm asked to explain my career, or if I offer up the explanation of my career, if someone doesn't ask and I just decide to tell them, I often talk. It's a bit easier in retrospect to say I picked this because of that, I picked that because of that, I picked that because of that, and quite honestly, it was mostly quite random. There wasn't a lot of genuine thought or intent. There was areas that I wanted to get into, but I would just navigate, take the jobs that were on offer at the time, not always, but mostly. And then
Mhm.
it was only really latterly in the last 10 10 to 15 years where I became more purposeful about it. But the word that I wrote down there was, in terms of what I got from what you explained there, Alexandra, was contribution. You contributed through your art before, when you were building up your career in terms of your symphony experience. And then how can I also contribute to society in a slightly different way, healing people, helping people navigate health challenges and get to where they're going. Contribution, when I say that to you, what comes up for you? Was that intentional at the time, or was it something that you've just kind of in retrospect thought, yeah, that's kind of where it came from?
Well, it was genuine because when you see your art crumbling and the orchestras, the formations that you have dedicated your life to, like bankrupting state after state,
Yeah.
you really have the feeling that people don't need you anymore in some way because nobody's supporting that. So, okay, so how can I be needed and still
Yes.
learn something new about life and also benefit myself by acquiring new knowledge that I may need for the rest of my life? Because when you're a musician, I mean, in my case, I was practicing 9, 10 hours a day. So
Mhm.
between four walls, I missed a lot on real life in many, many ways. So you have to put your ego behind yourself sometimes to see how people really suffer for real,
Mhm.
physically, mentally, and emotionally. And it was thought there because I knew that if I was useless as a musician, because like I said, I was not the most competitive musician. I was a decent violinist, but not good enough to survive an audition where I compete between 40 and 500 people for one orchestral spot.
Right.
And my experience with auditions proved that. So I had to wake up to that fact and
Mhm.
stop being in denial that, okay, you may practice all these hours, but it's still not working. Okay, so do something different. Um, but yes, with nursing and a high demand job means lots of people don't want to do this job. So it
Mhm.
must be a very hard job. Can I do
Mhm.
that? Can I learn to do a really, really hard job that most people don't want to do? And it's creating shortages. And then, of course, when I went into nursing, there was also the artificial shortage of people who were constantly calling in because they were burned out on the job. So you had
Yeah.
the actual shortage of people not wanting to be nurses, and then the actual nurses who try to avoid work at all costs. There were lots of these in the state hospital where I worked at some point. So a very eye-opening experience, but you have to really understand that people will want you where you're needed. And the earlier you recognize that, and I was 32, unfortunately, with at the time seemed late,
Yeah.
honestly, but it really worked that way. So I did have a genuine thought. I wanted to be a contributor and help others. Now, the other question is, of course, the healthcare system is not the way to do it, but that's a whole different topic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting. My sister back home in Scotland, she was 35 when she decided to stop being a chef and
Mm,
pursue a career in nursing, and
there you go.
hasn't looked back as a result. But it's interesting that you say, you know, it's a difficult job that many people would choose not to do, and then the people who choose to do it sometimes suffer as a result directly of the job, in terms of burnout, in terms of, maybe health challenges related to the exposure for various various patients. And my sister Caroline, she has suffered from that and seen colleagues suffer from that too. So it's one
Mhm,
of these kind
mhm.
of industry inside things that you don't really think about until you're there, and you're
Yeah.
thinking it's hard enough. without, the burden of, people being incapacitated through the rigors of
Yes.
the job too. That's such a fascinating insight there. So onto your book. So your book does talk about overcoming low self-esteem and embracing change. Could you share some key strategies from your book that helped you personally build self-confidence and tackle fear throughout your journey?
Yeah, so with the self-confidence, I had a long history of poor confidence over 20 years because of my stage fright that developed in my teenage
Right.
years and then in my 20s. And I really did everything to overcome it, but in the end, I wasn't 100% successful. But you have to face your responsibilities and stop blaming others. I had lots of things to blame in my life, which I
Yeah.
really wasted a lot of time doing that. And was I to blame for my stage fright? Partially, yes. To the present day, I don't have answers to certain particular, really frightful thoughts on stage that I had. I still don't have the answers on that. But when I began the nursing path, I decided to not focus at all on these previous fears. And that was a great plus that I made that decision because when you decide to make your anxiety a motivating factor rather than a crushing factor, then things
Mm,
start working for you. Okay. So
yes.
I recognized, okay, anxiety was basically telling me that I could do better here. I could do even better there. I can do much better in this area of my life. So I let it navigate me without suffocating my desire to develop myself into a better person, which was really the case in the previous 20 years as a musician. And I did have this wonderful teacher. We still have excellent relationship. She's Bulgarian, but she was extremely demanding. That was my teacher before I came to the States. And the way she analyzed everything, and she constantly demanded more and more and more and more. And to the point that I get the impression that I never could do things right. And that was really not her intention, but I took it the wrong way because I was a very immature student at 22 to 23 years old.
Mm,
And that's what spiraled things down even more. So I analyzed that particular episode of my life and I said, okay, so we're going to go differently with nursing because the nursing school is going to be way more demanding than any music school you've been into because now a lot of people's lives are at stake. So you better forget all that self-pity. So that's what helped. And then the anxiety on top of that kept me vigilant at all times to be really on top of my game. And that's how I combined the lack of confidence with facing my responsibilities and the overcoming fear and anxiety by making it hold me accountable instead of degrade me.
yeah. It's so powerful, eh, taking less than positive experiences from your past and making the time to have appropriate analysis of them in terms of how they affected you, how they have held you back or moved you forward or moved you in a direction that you didn't want or need to go, and then using that for good. A lot of people can do maybe one of those things, but then maybe don't manifest it into something going forward. And what really struck me there, Alexander, was, really the experience, that you had, and you having that relationship with your teacher now, and maybe having that opportunity to say, "This is how I felt. I thought you hated me," or whatever it was you said to her, and she's like, "No, no, no. Like this is the experience I wanted you to have." So it's really being mindful of the experience that you maybe think you're generating for yourself and other people, but it might not actually land that way with other people, and maybe there's a different way to qualify or quantify the experience that you're maybe giving other people. I'm saying this out loud and giving myself genuine food for thought in terms of the actual experiences in and of itself. So in your book as well, you talk about the importance of excellent health, and I'm assuming some of that comes from your nursing background and the ability to
Mhm.
be able to see the impacts of good or not so good health. How have your experience in nursing influenced your perspective on the optimization of health?
Well, the biggest shock, Gary, was in nursing school. In fact, when I was expecting to see very sick people as patients, but I never expected to see so many healthcare professionals that carried every disease known to man, that had
Right.
no control over their own health, yet they were teaching others how to live healthy. It was the biggest absurd I had ever seen, and I
Yeah.
saw it right away. And not only that, but the hospital where I specialized, because the College of Nursing was attached to a hospital that prided itself in being a cardiac hospital, heart health hospital mostly. And the food in their cafeteria was loaded with salt and the fat of the absolute worst kind. And these were the things that I first learned that you shouldn't eat as a cardiac patient. And so they were feeding this to their staff, to the patients' visitors. Horrible stuff. Okay, some patients get specialized dads from the actual kitchen there that was preparing the food for the patients that were staying in the hospital. But this was the first thing. And then, of course, it became clear that what we learned in nutrition was far from optimal health recommendation, because I didn't know at the time that the government was in bed with the pharmaceutical companies and the animal industry and everything that they put on their so-called pyramid, the food pyramid, which is a total scam. At least 10% of it, already 90% of it is a total scam. It was all related to the fact that these companies, the food industry, is paying to the Diabetic Association, the Heart Association, the Cancer Society to put their super unhealthy foods on the healthy so-called menus on their websites. Yeah. So that I was not aware of at the time. Nobody taught me that. So it took a lot more experience in research to finally say, oh, that's why you're feeding your staff and you're teaching these horrible practices to the patients. And that's why healthcare workers are in such poor health. It was absurd. So that's when I decided my obsession with health. And, I was a martial artist for 12 years. I had to eat well so that I can be fast, vigilant, and very resistant and resilient and enduring. But I wanted to be 100% example to my patients and loved ones if I was ever to have credibility, because most of the patients said, well, the doctor tells me to stop smoking. Hey, the doctor is smoking, so why should I stop smoking? And one of these patients was my late father, because he would always he would always point the absolute worst that he saw in a healthcare provider to justify his own bad habits. And my father was by far not the only patient, but he was the earliest example in my life that I saw that. And I was like, I'm not going to be that nurse that the patients were going to point fingers to say, she's doing it, so I can do it. Okay. So I go to the patients' homes now and I tell them, okay, listen, you can reverse your type 2 diabetes and heart disease in a matter of 4 to 7 months, depending how aggressive it is. But you want to go completely plant-based, organic, and whole food. And they're like, well, are you vegan? I said, yes, I am. I am vegan. I would never recommend you something that I'm not doing. So then they don't have much argument. Okay. Now, whether they do it or not, that's their business. But I am telling you, if I can do it, so can you. And it's not hard. And it's been a wonderful decision, one of the best decisions in my life. So why don't you give it a try? What do you have to lose? You're on 30 medications. You are an asset to the healthcare industry. Yes. You have no quality of life. And the people who listen do excellent. And those who don't listen, we call them patients for a reason.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And the genuine do what I say, don't do what I do is so prevalent in that story. I was actually talking yesterday with a coaching client about my project management teaching, which is the prevalent thing that I taught for a number of years. I still do, but I've branched out into other areas. I would be standing in class literally when it was physically in class, not virtual like it is now. And I would be saying, this is what you do. This is the template you'll use for that. This is what you'll use for this. This is what you'll use for that. And then I would get a question from the class that would say, do you do that in your real projects? I was a practicing project manager at the time. And I would say, no, I don't. But this is very, very much unashamedly saying, this is what you should do, because you're a beginner. And if you do this, you will develop good habits, you will develop a solid reputation, and you will have predictability in your projects. What I look upon all the stuff I'm teaching you now is these are tools in my tool belt that I'll be able to use at some point in the future. But in general terms, I don't need that. I have superseded that need for something else. But there was a level of hypocrisy there. I'm standing here teaching someone something that I don't do myself. And that's not as potentially grave as healthcare where you're standing there. It was such a great analogy. The doctor standing smoking a cigarette saying, you know what you should do? You should stop smoking because it's not good for you. Can I have a light there? That sort of thing. And it's incredible. And I wonder how many people truly took that path that you took, Alexandra, to say, this is not right. This is not working. This is madness, the way that the whole system is set up. I have to live a certain way for my own personal health and life journey. And I'm going to try and live that in, in inspiration of other people, that I will cross paths with at some point in the future, to be able to say, this will work. If you follow the instructions, it will work. If you don't, you'll get what you get. It's your choice on how to take that forward. So fascinating. So in the book, you also talk about the ability, and I think this really brings the conversation together, the ability to teach your mind to embrace challenges. And it sounds like you've had a lot of challenges over the years where you've got great, seed data to be able to use that to say, how did I manage this? How did I not manage that? Can you tell me a bit more about how a lay person could learn how to do that?
So, Gary, basically, it's about understanding that no matter what your aspirations are, no matter what seems very attractive as an area to pursue, you always have to understand that every time you delve into something a little bit deeper, you will encounter problems and challenges. And it's all
Yes.
about the problems and challenges, because
Yes.
every successful business, every successful enterprise is about solving problems, whether yours or others or both. And if you learn to really understand that that is the main thing of the business, it's not so much the reward or the end of the journey, but the actual problem solving ability. And that's with anything you do.
Yeah.
Because I changed jobs a couple of times as a nurse, and until I stopped changing jobs, because I said, okay, there is no job without problems. So what am I doing? So I'm going to stay here now. I'm going to really learn because you know how people, the grass is always greener syndrome.
Yes.
And this is where you grow. This is where you grow, because the more you deny yourself the ability to escape from a problem, the better you become at solving it.
Yeah.
And if you have fears of failure and all that, you have to forget about those fears. It's not about academic thinking anymore. It's about personal growth. And you don't have personal growth without mistakes and failures and setbacks. But how many times you get up after you fall is what matters.
Yeah.
So whether it's a small problem or a big challenge, the point is most people don't really like to work. They don't also know what really would make them happy. And that's where they bounce from one thing to another, trying for an easy way out. And there is no easy way out. And death is the best, easiest way out, but then you don't have any problems, right?
Yeah.
So while you live, you're going to have problems, you're going to have challenges. So you might as well embrace them, because the only people who don't fail is really the people who don't do anything with their life.
Yeah.
And we can't choose to be that way, because you see all around us that there are tons of pretenders, people who just sit there to exist. And that's what's the irritating part. And with every job, you have to deal with these people, because they are a majority,
Yeah.
no matter what you do. And this is what sets back many people. They get discouraged because no matter of your effort, I still cannot get ahead. Well, it's not exactly that, but you got to learn to, the more problems you solve, the better you are able to see opportunities where to progress a little bit more, easier to encounter the problems that you haven't solved yet, and not
Mhm.
to just spin your wheels in one place. This is where your perseverance, resilience, all this self-determination comes in. And the challenges are no longer a problem. They're just part of the reality, and you learn not to mind them, at least. Tolerate
Yeah.
them, not mind them. And if you really can embrace, because there are challenges that are more pleasant than others, but it
Mhm.
all comes together. It's like you're eating the fruit. The fruit has minerals and vitamins. You can't have one without the other for your body to function properly.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's the same with every enterprise that you undertake in your life. And challenges will be there all the time. And life is all about solving problems.
Yeah, it's it starts with you, and when I say it starts with you, that's a saying that I say a lot, all the time when I'm dealing with individual clients, when I'm dealing with groups or teams, or even the students in the universities that I teach at, is everything starts with you. If you want to try and find some justification to blame the system, the weather, the circumstances, the environment, the
Mhm.
politics, the community,
Right,
whatever
right.
it looks like, there's no shortage of things where you can blame. But if you start to then introspect and say, well, wait a minute, what is my to go back to experience again? What is my experience here? What can this teach me? What can I get from this? What can I give to this? and almost, removing the selfish need for protection to stand and kind of fight the circumstance and situation, that gives you the best opportunity if you have that growth mindset, that learning mindset. What can I learn? How can I grow? How can I use this for good, rather than for a comfort blanket that helps justify my actions and behavior, which most likely at the
Exactly.
time probably wouldn't serve you. And I think that's so obvious. It's obvious from the energy coming through the screen today. You think that's so obvious. And what's fascinating to me is that not everyone thinks like that, because it's such an appropriate way to serve yourself as you go forward, and give yourself the best opportunity to contribute the way that you would like to contribute. So I think there's always a place and a space for people like us to be able to say there's a different way to do this. As you said so poignantly, challenges and problems are going to be wherever you're going to be, because that's part of the human experience. Stop, embrace it, figure it out, what your role is in it, how you can help, what other resources are available to you as you move forward, and give yourself that best opportunity to succeed. And it's just fascinating that most people, well, maybe not most, I don't have data to back that up, many people have a completely opposite attitude to that, and would much rather take the path that's most followed, which is some sort of victim, some sort of blaming culture, and some sort of justification for that too. So it's very, very fascinating. So this is the Best You podcast, and what I like to try and do is finish off with a question, like what for you personally, Alexandra, is one regular practice that you employ to help you continue to become the best version of you?
It's basically, if I'm frustrated at something, I just remember that I used to be much worse. I overcame many, many things. So why stop now? Okay,
Yeah.
I have my frustrations. Everybody has their frustrations, but I work with them much differently than I used to when I was younger.
Mhm.
And I had that exact poor mindset that you just analyzed so well in your comments, because I've been there, done that for over 20 years. I had
Mhm.
that victim mentality, that blame mentality. And I so well know that it doesn't work, that I always try to turn to my own resourcefulness and ability to solve whatever frustration I have. And it works much faster, especially if I immediately address the problem. That's the other tactic, which
Yeah.
I like very much. When I see a problem, I let the frustration go through me for 2 minutes, because I'm a very, I have a lot of anger issues. I used to have. I mean, I'm much better now, but they
Yeah.
don't completely go away. So if I get hit with a problem that's not planned, I let it pass for 2 minutes through my mind and I said, okay, so let's fix that. But
Yes.
again, it's a much more tamed process right now than it used to be, because when I was in my teens, 20s, and even early 30s, I just used to rage all around the house without solving anything. So that's,
Yeah.
venting, they
Yeah.
say here in the United States. But I don't do this anymore, because it's like counterproductive and it's a waste of energy. So first of
Yeah.
all, I have to calm my mind, and then I just say, okay, I've solved so many things. I can deal with that. It's just a little bit annoying, mildly annoying, but I fix it, and by the end of the day, it's fixed usually. So
Yeah.
it's really about the mindset from the
Yeah.
beginning. And most problems are never invited or called for. That's just the
Yeah.
other thing, because they always catch us unprepared. There is never, and you also, the other very important strategy, Gary, that I have found very helpful, is that you really need to grade the problems by gravity, how graveness, how bad they are. Because when
Yeah.
you work with sick people, you see real problems. I mean, there are some
Mhm.
conditions that are very hard to reverse, particularly mostly because of mindset, mostly because of indoctrination into disease, what's terminal, what's not terminal. And then you see people stuck in these situations and you realize you're much better. You're like, okay, if this person is handling that, I should be able to handle my own crap. I mean, just shame on me that I'm, being such a whiner right now. So this is another thing. You put yourself into somebody else's perspective, and you say yourself, if say Jane could do this, I should be able to do this, because she overcame so much more than I did. So what makes me think that I am entitled to be a miserable person because of my dumb problems? And
Mhm.
I always have this mindset. It's always ready, this package of 3 or 4 things that I just told you. I let them immediately go through my mind if I'm frustrated. And everything then clears up and I focus on the problem, which is what I should have done in the first place. But I just have to deal with the frustration first, because my nature, I'm from Eastern Europe. I had two very angry parents in some ways. And so I did have a little bit of inheritance for that. So I'm still, I mean, I don't want to get rid of it, because I like that. It comes very handy in some situations, but when it points towards solving certain problems, it's not handy. So that's where we separate and I say, okay, so we have to do some mental work here for 2 minutes, and then I'm ready to. So I do that very regularly, I admit.
And I love that you said that, and then provided the kind of the rationale for that, because often sometimes there's a propensity or almost a desire to say, I just don't deal with that feeling anymore. I just don't have it anymore. Whereas you're saying, I embrace it, I absorb it, I experience it. I just experience it for a lesser amount of time as I go forward, and then I deal with it. I do something with it to get myself towards
It
a
really is
resolution.
a martial art. It's a martial art to
Yeah.
deal with your own anger. It's interesting.
Yeah, I do love that, because a lot of times if you're suppressing it, you're actually not dealing with anything, and then it's going to manifest itself in some other way.
Yeah,
And so the
that's
ability
right.
to actually acknowledge it for what it is, yeah, that's so powerful and poignant. Alexandra, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you very, very much for taking the time. Before I let you go, where can people find you?
Well, thank you so much for having me. First of all, Gary, it was wonderful
Pleasure.
talking with you. People can find me at my website. It's called holisticselfconfidence.com,
Mhm.
and that's where the book is. Well, the paperback is only available in the United States, but the ebook is available all over the world. It's the same price on my website, or Amazon, or Barnes and Noble, or Apple Books, or Smashwords. Same exact price, but they can go to the website holisticselfconfidence.com. There is a blog there. There are lots of things that they can look at to see if they want to trust me with the book.
Excellent.
So
Wonderful. Thanks again.
thank you, Gary. Thank you.
Hello again. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode, and I do hope that you found it valuable and gained some insights. I do have an ask for you. If you enjoyed this podcast, I would absolutely love it if you would connect with me on my socials, and that's at LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Just search for my name and do whatever it is you need to do there to follow me and stay updated with all the latest content, tips, and discussions. And for any more resources that you're looking for, feel free to visit my website, garygillen.com. And while you're there, you can book a free, no obligation 30-minute coaching call directly with me through the site. Whether you're looking to enhance your performance or tackle a new challenge, I'm absolutely here to help you succeed, and I would absolutely love to hear from you. Thanks very much again, and until next time, keep pushing towards your goals and getting better each and every day, my friend.